Now that you've found UBN Radio and discovered our quality talk shows, it's time to spread the word to friends, family, and the universe. 24 hours of music and talk. Radio without limits. That's why people keep coming back for more. That's UBNradio.com.
Real life isn't always easy. Real life brings tough questions and difficult decisions. That's why there's Compassionate Conversation with Catherine Tull.
Say what you need to say. Say what you need to say.
Every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific, a show about life and the choices we make. Compassionate Conversation with Catherine Tull on UBNradio.com.
Hi, this is Catherine Tull, your host for Compassionate Conversation on Universal Broadcasting Network. I am excited to be with you today. Of course, I am every week, and I know I say that every week, but it's another beautiful day in Los Angeles. It's fall. The air is a little cooler. I'm actually wearing long sleeves, which is very fun after months and months of warm weather. And this month, we have another very important topic. Last month, we talked about the sadder side of intimate relationships. We talked about domestic violence and interpersonal violence all month long, honoring Domestic Violence Awareness Month. This month, we are going to talk about the happier side of personal relationships. Every week this month, we're going to be talking about your intimate, loving relationships from many different aspects. And I have fabulous guests lined up for every week this month. With no further ado, I want to introduce today's guests. These are two of my favorite people in the whole world, Francine Beauvoir and Bruce Crapuchette. Bruce and Francine are both licensed clinical psychologists. They have been in the field of family therapy and couples therapy for more than 20 years. They were specially trained by Harville Hendricks and his lovely wife and partner, Helen LaKelly Hunt, in a profound form of couples therapy called imago therapy. And you may know the work of Harville Hendricks from his multi-million-dollar selling book, Getting the Love You Want, which is all about how to be in couplehood successfully. Bruce and Francine have been practicing with couples for more than 2 decades now. You have helped hundreds and hundreds of couples, and I have had the privilege of being in your class as a therapist, being trained in imago therapy so that I can then take that work out and work with more couples. Welcome to Compassionate Conversation.
Thank you, Catherine.
Well, we're happy to be here.
I love having crowds of hundreds in this studio.
Yeah.
I do too.
I'm very excited to have you here today because of all the therapists I have ever met, I have never met two people as wise and as experienced as the two of you are in really facilitating profound change in couples where I have personally witnessed in your work where they have come in with very deep problems that are affecting their relationships and keeping them from having the kind of intimacy and connection that they really want. So it's really such an honor and a privilege to have you here on the show. I just want to make sure that I have said about you everything that's important to say to introduce you to my audience. Francine received her PhD from USC and is the author of Raising Cooperative and Self-Confident Children. And Francine, you and I have already talked about coming back on the show to talk about compassionate parenting, which I would love. Bruce received his PhD from Fuller Graduate School of Psychology in Pasadena and was chief psychologist at a psychiatric hospital for 14 years before going into imago training rather. Both of you are members of the American Psychological Association and Imago Relationships International. And Francine, I know that you spent many years working in the prison system as well. So both of you are informed in your work with people from various sides. It's not been solely within the context of imago therapy, but I know that you have really devoted yourself to practicing that particular form of couples therapy for many, many years. So I wanted you to be my first guests in discussing intimate relationships and loving relationships all month. And I thought that the most important place to start is with the topic for today: why do we choose the partner that we choose. And I know that the two of you are so well versed in in why we make that choice. So why do we choose who we choose? What are the characteristics that draw two people together to fall in love?
Well, first I'd like to address your terminology. Why do we choose who we choose?
Here we go, folks.
Well, because mostly it happens. We don't choose. We
Okay.
think we choose, but we actually fall in love. And that quote unquote choice is actually an unconscious choice. We don't sort of wake up in the morning and then from this part of the brain say, I'm going to fall in love today. And Bob over there, yeah, I'd like to fall in love with him. So that's the first point I would like to make, that primarily the falling in love process takes place at an unconscious level below
Okay.
our level of consciousness. But the question still remains, why? That still is a good question.
Okay.
And I might speak to that.
Please.
Joy to be here. Thank you for inviting us.
It's so fun to have you here in studio with me.
That nature has evolved us to really want to grow and mature. We have this thing deep inside us, so we want to maximize our potential. We want to become all we can be.
Yes.
And nature has designed it that the way to really get there is in couplehood. We're born into relationship, and it's in relationship that we find healing and growth and potential. And so it has designed us to select at an unconscious level just the right person that will put us on that path, that will recapitulate our unfinished business and help us to be in a growth context. And so the falling in love is a bonding experience, because growing up is going to be a painful and difficult road to travel, and we might cop out of actually doing it. But if we fall in love, we get bonded, and so we tend to stay there long enough to really accomplish that growing up process.
So the two of you really don't feel that choice, at least conscious choice, is really what influences who we partner with, that it comes from a deeper and a more unconscious place.
Both. In order to end up falling in love with the person we fall in love with, I do believe that there are some conscious traits, conscious behaviors that must be there for
Yes.
us to even pay attention to this person. For example, we had a new couple last night in group, which we both run. And the way those two persons met was through writing workshops. They're both writers. So there has to be something which consciously does intrigue both persons in
Okay.
order to even prepare the soil for something more to happen.
Yes.
So sometimes people are both, they love nature, they belong to the Sierra Club, music. I mean, there is some drawing characteristics, which is conscious.
Yes.
And what Bruce was saying is equally valid and equally true. That would not be enough, just the fact that we both like classical music or we both are writers. That would not be enough. There are many, many, many people who like classical music or are writers. It takes more than that. The two things that come to my mind is, one, we are energy, and energetically, some of us carry what we call in Imago a maximizing energy. This is a big energy.
Yes.
Lots of words, lots of emotions, lots of, vivaciousness.
Yes.
Other people carry a very, what we call minimizing energy, quieter, and more thoughtful, inwardly focused. And one of our tenets of the theory of Imago is that we fall in love with a person who has complementary energies. And so one person will carry the maximizing energy, the other person will carry the minimizing energy. And I would say from our experience, that has proven true 100% of the time.
I think I neglected to say in introducing the two of you that you are a married couple. You have been married for 47 years. Is that right?
That's
Yes.
right.
You have 4 children
Yes.
who are all grown now.
All grown
and
and
some
married.
grandchildren.
Grandchildren.
I've gotten to see the picture. It's a beautiful, beautiful family. So Bruce and Francine, for my audience, Bruce and Francine not only are speaking about couplehood from a professional and highly trained perspective, but also as a married couple. I have seen you together in your home. I have watched you interact on multiple occasions. I know who the maximizer and the minimizer are in your relationship.
Can you possibly know?
So I certainly see this borne out in your marriage, this short view that I have of it. And as I've studied imagotherapy with you, I mean, it makes perfect sense. And as the theory gets more and more intricate, it continues to make more and more sense. And I certainly see that in all the couples that I treat in my private practice in Los Angeles as well. So I wanted to make sure that the audience knows that you also are very intimate with the state of couplehood and specifically marriage from your own personal experience. We're going to take a very quick station break. Today I have in studio Bob Merrick, who is graciously standing in for John Williams, my regular engineer. John was unable to be with us today. So Bob, we're going to go to a station break very briefly. This is Catherine Tull, your host for Compassionate Conversation. Stay tuned. We're going to come back and talk more about why we choose our intimate partners. We'll be right back.
In the future, talk radio will actually educate, inspire, and make you think. The future is now. Topics and music that affect your life from Universal Broadcasting Network. Tune in at ubnradio.com.
Hi, this is Catherine Tull, licensed psychotherapist. Life can be complex, and your thoughts about it matter. If you've ever felt stuck and wanted answers, I'm available to help. Through my private practice in Los Angeles, by Skype and by phone, and through my book, The Next Bold Step, help is available. The Next Bold Step, learning to love and value yourself and know that you matter, is your roadmap to deeper self-understanding and moving ahead. Contact me at catherinetull.com. Better tomorrows are waiting.
Real life isn't always easy. Real life brings tough questions and difficult decisions. That's why there's Compassionate Conversation with Catherine Tull.
Say what you need to say. Say what you need to say.
Every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific, a show about life and the choices we make. Compassionate Conversation with Catherine Tull on ubnradio.com.
This is Catherine Tull, host of Compassionate Conversation on ubnradio.com. If you're just joining us, I have in studio with me today Francine Beauvoir and Bruce Crapuchettes, both licensed psychologists and founders of the Pasadena Institute for Relationships, certified master imago therapy trainers and clinicians. And we are talking about the very important question, why do we choose who we choose to be in relationship with? And we were just talking about the fact that that happens on both a conscious and an unconscious level. And Bruce, you were talking about the fact, you said something so beautiful about the fact that we are impelled and compelled from inside out to grow and evolve, and that our evolution also calls us to then be attracted to certain kinds of people. And Francine, you were telling us about the polarity of maximizing energy and minimizing energy, how some people are very outspoken, lots of words, lots of emotion. Of course, I can't identify with that at all. And typically in a relationship, we will be attracted to someone with a complementary energy, not the same, but I, for example, would be attracted to someone with minimizing energy, someone who would respond more quietly and not so loquaciously, perhaps, to a similar moment in time. What are the other characteristics that draw people to fall in love with one another?
Well, this would be at an unconscious level, and that is that we are drawn to someone who's going to trigger our unfinished business. So we tend to think we're going to be drawn to somebody who's maybe replicating all the positives in our background.
Right.
Like people say we marry our mother or marry our father, and we tend to think in the positive sense. But it's actually in the negative sense because of this urge inside to grow and maximize potential, we do need to work through the unfinished business.
Right.
And so we, at an unconscious level, are drawn to those negatives from our background. So we recapitulate the childhood wounds and repair them in the new intimate relationship.
At least that's the hope
That's
that
the
we
hope.
repair them.
Unconscious hope. We actually don't get married in order to repair at a conscious level. We get married to be happy.
So
And-
on an unconscious level, there is an awareness of wanting to repair.
Yes.
But because it's unconscious, we don't necessarily see that in our partner. And as we all know, as couples therapists, the people who come to us for help know they're in trouble. They don't have a clue how to repair, and they certainly didn't realize that they had any unconscious intention to choose someone that would help them heal. They don't want to. Most people, in my experience, don't really want to admit that they have anything that needs healing. They'd like you to help them fix what's immediately irritating them, but they don't really want to dive below the surface. Would you agree with that?
They're mostly aware that their partner needs fixing.
That's right. And I have had that same experience. When couples come in, it's typically, well, it's the other person's problem.
That's right.
And if you would just tell them that they're wrong and I'm right, we can wrap this up very quickly and go on with our lives.
Yes.
And of course, I know that you don't practice that way, nor do I. And couples will exit if they're not interested in actually learning what there is to be learned.
It may be absolutely correct that my partner needs some healing and growth in some area. That's not in question. What's in question is how do we get there? And as long as we remain unconscious, then let's take Bruce and I. So I, Francine, would want to single-handedly tell him who to be, how to be, in order to fix him, because I can see clearly he needs fixing. And invariably, the partner, whether it's mine or any partner, rebels against that strategy. But that's our most frequent unconscious strategy, is to try to fix the other.
Mm-hmm.
And because that strategy is doomed to failure, it doesn't work.
Right.
And intimate relationships become more and more discouraging and more shattered. And the connection is being disrupted. And it's not unusual that we might hear a person say, I have tried everything.
Yes.
Well, that person has tried everything on that path, which was to tell my partner how to behave, who to be, what to say, how to say it. And I have not yet gotten on the path of, how about I look at myself and I start to change some of the ways I relate to my partner. Much more painful, but much more likely to lead to success.
Yes. You know, I'm so glad that pardon me, that you brought that up. And listeners and viewers, I want to encourage you to call in with questions if you have some. The number here in studio is 323-284-7826. While we're on the air live, please call in with your questions, and Bruce and Francine and I will do our very best to give you some constructive information in a brief period of time. So please call in 323-284-7826. So Francine, I couldn't agree with you more, and I have to say I've certainly been guilty of this in my own relationships. It's very easy to see what is wrong with your partner.
Absolutely.
It's much harder to look at what your own part is in what isn't working in a relationship.
And Catherine?
Yes.
It's just a matter of wording, but I want to encourage all of us, to avoid the word "what is wrong with us," because it's almost putting ourselves down. And since I do like the term compassionate conversation, it is what is hurt in us.
Yes.
And what needs healing. Not because our parents were brutal beasts, just they were human beings. That's all.
Who did the best they knew how.
They did their best, and they could only be at one place at one time.
Right.
And depending on our own sensitivities, we felt hurt, we felt ignored, we felt anxious, whatever. And so we deserve some compassionate healing.
Yes.
Not kind of, well, look at what's wrong with you. Well, yeah, I have sensitivities.
Right.
And we all do.
I'm so glad that you are picking up on that language. Of course, I'm using the kind of day-to-day language that I typically hear from people in the room, and I agree with you completely. I find in working with people that it takes some trust building with the couples before they are able perhaps to hear a new kind of language that I would like to introduce into their thinking, a more compassionate way of holding themselves and certainly their partner, and being willing to regard the relationship itself as an entity that needs and deserves compassion and attention. People don't really think about the space between that they are creating. They think about, well, I have my needs and you have your needs and you are not meeting my needs, so this isn't working.
Exactly.
And they don't think about the space between that, as you have taught me and as I knew intuitively, that so desperately and tenderly wants connection, that really couples, partners want to feel that intimate connection that we all wanted from childhood, that often in childhood did not really get fulfilled, did not get met as much as we would have liked. And so as adults, we are still unconsciously, subconsciously pursuing that most intimate connection where we can really feel safe in the world. So what are some of the things that make being in love with someone so hard?
Well, let's see. Being in love is not hard. That comes easily, and that's the unconscious part. We fall in love, and it catches us off guard. Like 47 years ago, 48 years ago, we met in Paris at a party, and I had a conversation with Francine for about half an hour. She was a 20-year-old counselor of this youth group that we were having a party with. And I went home that night, and I said to my buddies, I met the woman I'm going to marry. And I only talked to her about half an hour at this party. She's only 20 years old, and we got married there in Paris 11 months later.
Oh my
Now,
goodness.
how unconscious could that be? I mean, I had gone to school, graduate school, met women, and had the list of 10 things that I wanted to find in a woman.
You mean that isn't the right way to go about
And I didn't have time in that half hour to go through that list of 10 things. But somehow I knew. So that's an unconscious choice. Now, we say we are drawn to and marry. And when I say marry, I mean to develop a committed, intimate relationship,
Yes.
which might bypass marriage in our modern times, get a house together, get pets together. And so we're in a committed relationship. We connect with somebody who's equally wounded with us, who's equally intelligent, and equally interested to be on the journey. Now, all those three things show up in different ways, but if that kind of match isn't there, we wouldn't have interest in each other.
Okay.
And so we tend to marry, connect with sort of equal maturity level. And so we're on this journey together. And this is really helpful also to know that it makes sense that we then equally contribute to the problems that are in the relationship.
Yes.
Now, couples come into the therapy session fighting, struggling. And what is all that about? It's about wanting connection, as you said. They're fighting, which seems to be polarizing, but it's a desperate desire to be connected. They don't know
Right.
how to get connected.
Right.
And as long as we can really see these people want to be connected, but don't know how. Now, the temptation, as many marital therapists fall into that trap, I think, is to resolve that particular problem, and so they get into problem solving.
Right.
But couples don't need problem solving. They need healing. They need to know how to get connected in a way that they just haven't been able to pull off. And so we provide a therapy that brings healing, not necessarily problem solving.
Right.
Absolutely. I like all of that. And we do sometime or might interweave what we might label problem solving. Let me give a concrete example.
Wonderful.
So,
Yes.
so it could make sense to your listeners or our listeners. So let's say that I am insecure. We might as well use real stuff. I certainly have been. And so I am insecure, and I'm afraid that Bruce is more interested in a lot of other things out there, more interesting than me, and might spend a lot of time on his iPhone because it's full of information and it's exciting, and I get worried that he forgets about me when he's not with me.
Uh-huh.
So as long as I am more unconscious, it is quite likely that I will harp on him. You're always on the cell phone. You don't care about me. Loin des yeux, loin du cœur. How do we say that in English? Out of sight, out of mind, out of sight, something like that.
By the way, that was French, that Francine was just kind of speaking to herself.
Speaking to myself, and which is cute because, you know, you have your own language and you go back to your language of origin, and Imago is a new language.
Yes.
It's a language of relationship that we are trying to teach
Yes.
couples. And so now, you know, I observe Bruce on his cell phone, and certainly from Bruce's perspective, what's the big deal? Half the world is on his, more than half the world, 90% of people look around, they're on their cell phone. What's your problem? Which makes sense. But I experience a big problem with it.
Yes.
That's what needs healing. If I can feel healed, then symbolically, Bruce being on his cell phone, I will not equate with, therefore, I am not interesting to you or I am not important to you. But until some healing happens, I equate my old brain, the back part of the brain, not the logical front side of the brain, equate, Bruce is on the cell phone, he does not love me, he's not committed to me, he's not interested in meeting my need, all sorts of negative interpretations.
Yes.
So I think something like this happens a lot. That's just an example. So what we guide couples to do, because ultimately we are guides and mentors and coaches, is to ask directly and positively for what you need.
Yes.
Which, let's say, in this case, could be something like, which we actually have done. Well, when you go on a trip, honey, I'd like you to call me once a day. Stay on the phone for a minimum of 3 minutes and tell me about your day.
Yes.
That's a positive request. And to the extent that my partner is willing to do that and actually did do that and did that over time, I begin to feel a greater state of relaxation
Yes.
in me. I don't have to mobilize my defenses, my energetic defenses, and I can begin to let it in. Wow, Bruce is voluntarily willing to do this behavior, which my brain translates into, therefore he does love me, therefore he is committed to me. That brings about healing.
Yes.
And we sort of have to learn to interweave a sense of really listening to a partner's needs without putting it down, which sometimes is very challenging.
Yes.
And at the same time, being willing to change some behaviors. So it's that interweaving which over time will bring growth and healing in the relationship.
So part of, the question that I asked was what makes being in love with somebody so hard? And there is a great difference between falling in love and that state of longer term love that relationships actually are. But I think that you just touched on a very important point, which is that healing requires consistent demonstration over a period of time. And I think that part of why success in relationships becomes a challenge is because without a lot of guidance, without a lot of opening yourself to a new way of looking at what isn't working between the two of you, people can get very enthusiastic quickly and say, oh, okay, I can do something different for a little while. Sure, I want my partner to be happy and feel safe, and I can call her every day when I'm on the road and spend 3 minutes of the phone, and they do it like 3 times. And then they forget. And by day 4, they've already forgotten. Now the partner feels frustrated. Like, well, see, you really don't love me because I asked you, and I asked you so clearly. And I did exactly what our therapist told me to do. And I identified my need, and I asked you for what I wanted, and I told you how long I needed you to stay on the phone with me. And you could only do it for 3 days, and then you forgot. See, that shows that you really don't love me. And I think that happens because learning a new behavior takes coaching. It takes commitment to staying on the course. It takes discipline to choosing. I like choice a lot. You really do have to choose to learn a new behavior, a new way of understanding your relationship, a new way of understanding not only how you're communicating, but how your language and actions are impacting your partner, and how everything we do creates a field in which our partner either feels safe or doesn't. And so that aspect that you mentioned, Francine, of over time, as it keeps happening, I will learn inside that I can relax because I will begin to believe that my partner really does love me because he's showing me in a way I can understand it, that he loves me. And I think that is where the bottom falls out a lot when couples try to make changes, is that the consistency and the ongoing aspect of doing things differently doesn't happen. Would you agree?
Yes, and I'd like to just underscore the question you had is, why is being in love so difficult? And I said, well, the in love part is not difficult. That's a feeling. So really there's 2 aspects of love. One is a feeling, and if I'm feeling in love, then love is easy.
Right.
But I liked your little opening tag there, compassionate conversation and the choices you make. Now, after we get over that in love time, then we make a choice. Are we going to be a lifetime couple? Now, that's a choice.
Right.
And now we start getting into the difficult part. And that's because all our early wounds are beginning to show, and we are getting in each other's way, and we start wanting to criticize each other using the language of origin that we were taught, which was criticism, and we tend to let it show in our relationship. So now we need to make a choice. I want to learn how to love you. Love you the way you need to be loved. And that's what's so hard, because being in love, we are both loving each other the way we need to be loved without even asking. It's unconscious.
Right.
But now that we're in the nitty-gritty of being in a relationship, now we need to make a choice. So the choice I make is I'm committed to you and your well-being. And I want to love you in the way you need to be loved. So yes, I do it 3 times, 3 phone calls. But it's the ongoing work of figuring out how to make that part of my ongoing behavior and commit myself to that action-oriented love. That's what's hard.
I know that one of the things that the 2 of you do that is such a wonderful model for all of us, myself included, who are your students, is that you take a walk every morning.
That's right.
Maybe not if it's storming outside. But
Well, we even fit it in this morning. We said, do we have time before the radio show? Yeah, we got it. We want to do it.
Living in California, we're very lucky.
Yeah, we are.
We can take walks
almost every day of the year.
most mornings.
And on those walks, you communicate. in a very important way. So the two of you really, as mentors, also set a marvelous example for what it looks like when a couple makes a commitment to themselves and to one another to continue to grow and learn and support the health of their relationship by communicating in an important way every day.
And that's a lovely segue into something certainly we'd need to share in this context, and that is that we promote the concept of dialoguing, and we call it imago dialogue using our theoretical frame there. And imago dialogue is 3 steps: mirroring, validation, and empathy, and learning how to stay in that structure so that we can really begin to connect in a very listening way and
Yes.
a validation of the other, even if we disagree. It's okay to disagree. Let you be you. You're very different from me, but I'm going to validate that rather than argue it.
And adding on to that, part of the work, ongoing work, is the word compassion that you have
Yes.
in your program. And that is, so I'm going back to this example of the phone, which I think is quite a common example.
Very
as
common
as I
today.
work with couples.
Yes.
And you see, what happens is, let's say I feel unloved or unimportant when Bruce spends a lot of time on his cell phone.
Yes.
It's a feeling. And the temptation for the partner is to come back with logic. Makes sense to me. Logically, it doesn't make sense. From a logical perspective, well, honey, I married you, I have kids with you, I go on a walk with you every morning, we make the mortgage together, we're taking vacation together. Come on, let's be logical. But we do not live our lives based on logic. We live our lives based on old brain, emotional, affective emotions, feelings.
Yes.
And so we have to make a commitment to be willing to show compassion, express compassion for the feelings of my partner, illogical as those feelings may be. They probably are
Yes.
very illogical.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make them any less real for the partner.
Right.
And so for all of us, we have to be willing to move ourselves out of our own cocoon, our own shell, to force ourselves to experience the experience of another human being. Because from a logical perspective, doesn't make sense.
Right.
It's because we're not dealing with logic here. We're dealing with emotional imprint, which took place probably long ago, and I've never gotten healed, and therefore they're still raw and oozing, and we need a compassionate ears and a compassionate statement and a sense of, wow, I never even thought that by being on my cell phone while we're having dinner, that would hurt you. I took that as that's life. And so now I really want to work on letting it in.
Right.
That little quote-unquote behavior of mine, seemingly innocuous, but for you, it's not innocuous.
We're going to take a quick break. This conversation is so important that I have actually skipped one of our breaks, but we are going to take one more break. This is Catherine Tull, your host on Compassionate Conversation, with my guest today, Francine Beauvoir and Bruce Krapachetz. Please stay tuned. We're going to be right back. We're talking about the difference between logic and emotion in relationships. Stay tuned.
Now that you've found UBN Radio and discovered our quality talk shows, it's time to spread the word to friends, family, and the universe. 24 hours of music and talk. Radio without limits. That's why people keep coming back for more. That's ubnradio.com.
Real life isn't always easy. Real life brings tough questions and difficult decisions. That's why there's Compassionate Conversation with Catherine Tull.
Say what you need to say. Say what you need to say.
Every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific, a show about life, and the choices we make. Compassionate Conversation with Catherine Tull on ubnradio.com.
Hi, it's Catherine Tull. Welcome back to our last few minutes of this installment of Compassionate Conversation on Universal Broadcasting Network. In studio with Francine Beauvoir and Bruce Crapuchettes, both psychologists and master imago therapists. We're talking about being in an intimate, committed relationship today and some of the nuances of that, some of what makes it particularly challenging. Right before the break, we were talking with Francine about the kind of ongoing conflict between logic and emotion in relationship. And this is such a wonderful lead into what my last question was going to be today, which is, what is the most important thing to think about when being in an intimate relationship with a partner? And I think it goes right back to what you were just saying, Francine, about remembering about compassion, remembering that logic is not the wrong way, that emotion is not the wrong way, that it's a different way, and we need to be open enough to embrace that our partner's way of thinking about the world is equally as legitimate.
Yeah, you definitely, you have that right. Thinking about that question, Catherine, read that again.
What is the most important thing to think about when being in an intimate relationship with a partner?
Something came to me just there, is that we're burdened by the thousands of years, I don't know, I should say hundreds of years of mythology that we fall in love and live happily ever after. And Hollywood still promotes that.
Oh, yes.
I love seeing romantic comedies, but the solution in the romantic comedy of the problematic that emerges, an affair or fighting, and they get separated, is to fall back in love. The solution is always falling back in love.
And somehow in movies they always make that happen.
Yes, they do. And so it's hard to get away from that idea that if we were really meant for each other, we get seduced into this idea of being meant for each other, we would be happy. So maybe we're not meant for each other. Maybe I'm married to the wrong person. And so really the thing to think about is that we create love by making choices of how we're going to live our life together. Like, I need to make a fundamental choice. What kind of relationship do I want to have?
Yes.
And how then strategically can I get there? And it doesn't happen automatically like the mythology.
Mm-hmm. So the word that comes to me that I think is the most important is going to be the word commitment. Because it is going to be difficult to take on a different path. In the best of world, I like to tell my clients, you have come to me to learn a new language of relationship. And you have this dream that maybe you can learn this new language of relationship in, 3 or 4 sessions. It is a dream.
Yes.
We would like to be able to bypass all the difficulties and all the pitfalls and all the slips and knockouts. But I said, if you came to me to learn French, you would know that probably you're in for the long run if you want to really learn French.
Right.
That no matter what a brilliant student you are, and no matter what a brilliant teacher I may be, time is of the essence, not time alone, time practicing a whole new language.
Yes.
And I believe that that's really what's happening in intimate relationships. It will take time practicing a new language of love relationships.
And let me just interrupt there. On our walk, we always do dialogues. So we use the walk for doing our dialogical work. We encourage our couples. They say, well, when should we do the dialogue, that
Right.
3-step dialogue? Is it when we're feeling emotional, about ready to fight, we stop the fight and have a dialogue instead? That's usually not going to work. It's not a good time to dialogue. You want to dialogue by the clock, or by the calendars. Have it when you're going to dialogue. And Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 7 o'clock, we're going to sit down and have a dialogue, a structured dialogue that's carefully done, it has parameters, and it's designed for healing.
Right.
And so we do it every single morning. Now, the fact we've done that for 20 years we got a lot of practice under our belt, and that makes all the difference.
And I just want to clarify this again for our listeners. Some people are listening live at the time that we're doing this broadcast, but a lot of people listen later. So I want to clarify that, Bruce, when you're referring to dialogue, we're not talking about two people talking
Not
together.
talking about a conversation, no.
Right. We're talking about a very specific and structured format of interacting in which there are the three steps: mirroring, validating, and empathizing. And that in imago therapy, that structure is taught. So we're not encouraging by just hearing those words that now all of a sudden you can go back to your partner today or tonight or next week and say, I want to have a dialogue with you, and here's what it's going to look like. It is a very specific structure that we imago therapists teach our clients in order to be able to communicate in a very loving and constructive way.
Yeah, and I might point out why we recommend this theoretically.
Please do, yes.
In that we are born connected. We're born whole, connected, interactive. And then we get hurt. We get wounded. Mom is too busy with other children or work or whatever. I don't get the attention I need. I don't feel important, and I'm wounded. So I defend myself against that wound by becoming isolated, or I want to protect myself
Yes.
from being wounded. And so what do I want to say?
Symbiotic.
Yeah, it's a symbiotic state. I don't want to get into that word too much because that's a little complicated. What am I trying to say? I objectify others. So whereas before I was really in relationship, now I pull away and I objectify others the way I was just objectified, because that's the wounding. I get objectified.
Right.
Now, and I lose my empathic connection. That was the word I was trying to look for there.
And this starts in early childhood usually.
Very early childhood.
Yes.
It gets reinforced all the way through. Now we get married, and so the healing comes by recapturing empathic connection. So it's not that the dialogue itself is what cures.
Right.
It's dialogue is a procedure to retrain ourselves to become empathically connected.
Yes.
I become empathic as I mirror. I become empathic as I validate you. And then in the empathy stage, to really connect in with your feelings, it's all a training to become empathic, because empathy is what heals.
That's right. And thank you so much for saying that, Bruce. And, to piggyback, Francine, on what you were saying earlier about it requires really an investment of time. I, too, experience in my practice that most people come in and they really are looking for problem solving, and they're looking for a very quick fix. I think that we live in an era of instant gratification now more than ever before. Mm-hmm. So you can reach somebody, 15,000 miles away on the other side of the world in an instant with your iPhone or on your computer. Well, why can't you instantly fix my marriage? And I don't want to have to put time in because I'm way too busy and I have way too many things to do. And there are lots of other things for me to spend my money on. You should be able to fix my marriage very, very quickly. But we have to be willing to learn to be empathic in order to really be successful in our relationships. And what could possibly be more important than your most intimate relationship? Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of people stop looking at it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to suggest that actually, theoretically, the way we look at some of the dialogical work we do in Imago as a meditation process. You see, we're talking about a lifestyle change.
Yes.
And sometimes Bruce and I like to think of practicing this dialogue, which is a structured way of talking to each other, as relational meditation.
We are down to the last minute of our show, believe it or not. Before we started, I told you how quickly it would go, and we're at the end already. You can reach Bruce and Francine, find out more about their groups, their workshops, and their trainings at Pasadena Institute Institute.com.
Yes,
Is that right?
that's right.
PasadenaInstitute.com on the internet. Of course, you can find me at CatherineTull.com. If you contact me directly, Catherine at CatherineTull.com, I'll be happy to put you in touch with them. We all offer couples therapy to individual couples. Bruce and Francine run groups for Francine. You run a group for women, and you run couples groups on an ongoing basis. You present the couples workshop. You present a parenting workshop. So there are so many resources available in Imago work for couples, for parents. Bruce and Francine, I am so grateful to you. And obviously, we just got started, so we just have to do this again. You have so much to share and so much wisdom, and I'm so grateful to be one of your students. And I just can't thank you enough for being on the show today. So again, Pasadena Institute for Relationships, PasadenaInstitute.com. This is Catherine Tull, your host for Compassionate Conversation, thanking Francine Beauvoir and Bruce Krapuschetz. Have a beautiful week, many blessings, and I'll be back with you next Wednesday. Bye-bye.
Real life isn't always easy. Real life brings tough questions and difficult decisions. That's why there's Compassionate Conversation with Catherine Tull.
Say what you need to say. Say what you need to say.
Every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific, a show about life and the choices we make. Compassionate Conversation with Catherine Tull on ubnradio.com.